Welcome to our latest explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the archives to unpack one of the most fascinating and, frankly, terrifying historical events on record. We're talking about the quantum lattice fracture, specifically focusing on the meticulous documentation found in Chapter 183 of the Obsidian Pillars archival collection. We're going to completely map out that hyper-vibrant silver dawn, the exact moment when human intentions stopped being just a private thought in your head and instantly became a raw, unbuffered physical force across an entire continent. So, how exactly did humanity survive the sheer overwhelming velocity of its own character? Well, let's find out. Here's our roadmap for this case study. We'll kick things off by exploring the zero latency paradox, and then we're going to trace the chaotic feedback loops across three hypervolatile sectors: Oromor, Avaris, and the Iron Marches. After that, we'll break down the master archival matrix grid before finally tackling the ultimate existential threat at the perimeter, defying the outer void. All right, part one. The zero latency paradox, or when thoughts become velocity. To really understand this crisis, we have to start at the epicenter, Archon's crest. Under the newly unified unbound lattice protocol, spatial latency, which we mathematically represent as delta t, just evaporated completely. It reached absolute zero. High chronicler Belial recorded that the alignment of structural intent became perfectly parallel to material resistance. Now, what does that actually mean in plain English? It means the buffer between thought and reality completely vanished. The physical world lost its delay. If a population's internal validation dropped by even a single decimal point, their physical infrastructure experienced instantaneous molecular disintegration. It's a staggering concept. Human intention wasn't just an idea anymore. It had literally transformed into immediate raw physical velocity. This wild evaporation of latency created some absolutely startling, chaotic dichotomies right out in the streets. Imagine you're on a city patrol. If you harbored even a single subconscious microsecond of unvarnished panic or arrogance, you didn't just feel a little tense. Your iron armor instantly multiplied its atomic mass, literally pinning you to the travertine floors as a decorative lead statue. But on the flip side, soldiers who are marching with genuine, pure, protective intent, they watch their iron spears blossom into living olive branches right in their hands. The environment completely abandoned its structural inertia. There's actually a recorded instance where a simple everyday tavern brawl over an unpaid debt triggered a localized gravity inversion. It literally suspended three whole city blocks 40 feet in the air. To think was to act, and to feel was to permanently alter your immediate surroundings on the spot. Moving on to part two, Oromor's erupting metabolic cycles, or the speed of stewardship. Down in the southern basin, the metropolis of Oromor was dealing with an even wilder manifestation under Master Elena. We have to methodically break down the mathematical logic here, specifically the core systemic formula governing their equilibrium, metabolic. If we evaluate the operators in the numerator, we have the intrinsic intention vector multiplied by the moral divergence factor and the stewardship variable. Now look at the denominator, which features the scarcity variable. The math here is absolute. It proves that any attempts to artificially manipulate or hoard resources triggers an exponential surge in local spatial instability, driven entirely by that scarcity variable. By eliminating latency, human character was converted into an immediate environmental echo chamber. The pure energetic output of what people were feeling and plotting was no longer buffered by time or physics. And the resulting physical feedback loops, they were staggering. Picture this. Grand Agoraks feel a fleeting moment of anxiety about a potential winter freeze. Instantly, stalks of wheat erupt from the black earth at bullet speed, shooting up 12 feet tall, only to immediately dissolve into this golden, volatile dust.
Or take a baker with a hidden, greedy desire to overcharge his customers. He suddenly finds his dough expanding with explosive force, completely trapping him inside a hyper-dense, spongy matrix of yeast. Archons who tried signing deceptive contracts watched in horror as their ink spawned literal boring worms that ate right through the parchment to etch their true hidden motives directly into the stone desks. Basically, the lower the mutual trust, the more violent the physical rebound. One corrupt grain dealer who secretly wanted to maximize his profits during a shortage watched his brass scale weights melt into liquid mercury, pooling around his boots to trap him in a silver cage. But the beautiful thing is, when the observing crowd laughed at this immediate cosmic justice, their genuine collective joy caused the surrounding fruit trees to blossom instantly, dropping ripe, perfect pears right into their hands.
That brings us to Section 3, the liquid vaults of Avaris, or wealth in superposition. Let's shift over to the commercial heart of the continent, Avaris. Here, Master Lucan was applying the calculus of fluid abundance to a rapidly transmuting financial system. The absolute crux of this is the equation, phi circulation. Pay close attention to the denominator here, which is the hoarding vector. The mathematical reality they faced was undeniable. If that hoarding vector approached zero, the internal circulation variable expanded to infinity. It exposed scarcity not as some fixed physical limitation of the Earth, but as a literal geometric defect of human character. Once the system realized this, the velocity of transaction shattered all traditional economic models. A single loaf of bread, if traded with genuine mutual trust, would multiply its nutritional value 50 times over, easily feeding an entire neighborhood. Wealth itself stopped being a static object and became a dynamic wave function. The physical anomalies in Avaris were just off the charts. City vaults literally entered a state of liquid superposition. If a merchant tried to hoard coins out of greed, the gold just lost its solidity. It melted into this glowing vapor, seeping right through the wooden chests, only to reform in the pockets of citizens doing public works. Down on the grain exchange, the trading floor transformed into an interactive, glowing topological light grid. When transactions were born out of actual trust, the floor beneath their feet solidified into beautiful, translucent green jade. But, and here's where it gets really crazy, when a group of high archons attempted to exploit the market by short-selling the southern harvest to create artificial panic, the grid completely lost its cohesion. They literally plummeted through the floor. They fell into a shallow, non-lethal, fluorescent swamp sludge that physically manifested their stagnant capital. And to top it off, their private ledgers floated around them in the muck, broadcasting their hidden short positions in bright neon letters for the whole city to point and laugh at. All right, part 4, Iron March's kinetic rebound, or the parody of justice. Meanwhile, out in the jagged frontier canyons of the Iron Marches, Commander Kalen was witnessing an incredible, immediate weaponization of the environment against unexpressed vengeance. We need to look at the formula of kinetic rebound parity, or gamma justice. If you evaluate the operators inside the integral, you see the injure vector compounding exponentially over time, positioned directly against the restitution vector. Because latency was sitting at absolute zero, any lingering spark of unexpressed injury instantly compounded against restitution. This forced the physical environment to violently reflect that exact specific frequency of internal resentment. What that meant in practice was a magnificent display of systemic enforcement. For example, a veteran centurion merely remembered an old, petty insult, and instantly his heavy steel broadsword erupted into a self-directing entity. The hilt elongated, wrapping around his arm like a metallic serpent, while the massive blade bent backward into a perfect circle, pointing its razor-sharp tip directly at his own nose. And it just vibrated there with a mocking hum until he consciously chose to forgive the slight.
absolutely wild. But the absolute peak of this environmental justice happened when a group of rebellious mercenaries tried to seize a local armory. Their chaotic, harmful intent caused the defensive field to react, but not with explosions or force. Instead, it merged every single one of their stolen weapons into a massive animated iron carousel. It scooped these fierce, hardened rebels up into the air, trapping them on metallic horses, and spun them around to a cheerful calliope melody that echoed across the canyon. The carousel flat out refused to let them dismount until they actually sang three-part harmony apologies to restore the public peace harmonies.
Section 5. The Master Archival Matrix Grid, the Continental Network. Back at the primordial obsidian pillars, High Chronicler Belial realized that localized corrections just weren't cutting it anymore. The collective emotional baseline of humanity was now creating a unified continental weather pattern. To counteract the total dissolution of definition, scholar exile Ilian Mar formulated this incredibly complex 7-part master archival matrix grid. This matrix exhaustively cross-referenced all the major network nodes. We're talking Archon's Crest, Avaris, Iron Marches, Lioness, Cyberus, Oromor, and Leith. It tied their respective sovereign masters, their specific calculus indexes, their sovereign virtues, and their extreme quantum anomaly manifestations all together. By projecting this integrated architecture of human experience across all the capitals, the matrix proved the absolute cross-border dependency of the network. They were all fundamentally tethered to each other's survival. Which brings us to our final section, defying the outer void, the absolute edge. This absolute cross-border integration faced its final, terrifying test at the extreme perimeter of the northern frost sphere. Past the volcanic caldera of Leith, the outer void launched a truly insidious assault. Now, this wasn't an attack by monsters or opposing armies. It was an attack on structural definition itself. You have to ask yourself, what actually happens when structural definition dissolves into the void? The void essentially tried to convince the boundary systems that definition was just an illusion. Solid, structured granite didn't break or crumble, it simply forgot how to be stone. It lost its color, it lost its weight, and it dissolved into a translucent, gray fluid that literally started sliding off the edge of the world like melted wax. And this is where we see a breathtaking climax of protective stewardship. High Captain Valerie marched right up to this creeping, dissolving edge to initiate the ultimate countermeasure. Step 1. She completely refused to draw a weapon or shout military commands. Force wasn't going to work here. Step 2. She carried a small physical scribe's desk right to the extreme boundary edge. Step 3. She laid a massive blank sheet of parchment directly over that encroaching, static gray fluid. And finally, step 4. She took up a heavy iron quill, dipping it into iridescent echo core wet ink. She absolutely refused to let the infinite dark erase them. Standing there, her pride transformed purely into protective stewardship, she shouted right into the swirling static. She declared that humanity was now the master of the ledger. They would not ask the void for permission to exist. Her words echo through the archives. We choose to define ourselves anew with every rising sun. From his eternal tower out in the gray wastes, Watcher Belial validated this final, incredible act of defiance. As he finally laid down his heavy iron quill, something amazing happened. The boiling ink of the Grand Ledger settled. It transformed into this radiant, serene silver light, completely illuminating the chamber. The final archival seal was secured, successfully stabilizing the quantum lattice fracture and expanding the human matrix into the outer realms once and for all. The ultimate verdict of this historical archive is clear. Humanity had successfully mastered the geometry of their characters. By forcing the world to reflect their inner truth with absolute zero latency, they discovered a dynamic balance. And as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a profound question to chew on. If we stripped away all spatial latency today, if the buffer between your thoughts and reality completely vanished right at this very moment, what physical shape would your hidden intentions take today? Something to think about. Until next time.